I get asked the question all the time, James, should I invest or wholesale in a virtual market, or should I just stay and invest in my own market in my own backyard? Well, in this video, I'm going to answer the question, should you just invest in your own backyard, or should you go virtual? And if you do go virtual, how to select a virtual market to where you're going to be able to hit the ground running as fast as possible and make the most amount of money with the least amount of marketing dollars spent. Hey, what's going on? If you're new to this channel, my name is James Hodges and I'm the founder of REI Game Changers, which is a company that helps wholesalers and house flippers scale their businesses to six figures, multiple six figures per month. And this channel is all about documenting the best practices that I found in scaling my own real estate company from ground zero to multiple seven figures. Now, today, I want to dive into a topic that is a question that I get asked a ton, which is the question of, should I stay in my local market and invest and wholesale in my local market, or should I go into a virtual market and invest or wholesale in a virtual market? And so firstly, let's talk about whether you should just stay in your own market, in your own backyard. And the answer that I tell most people, most of the time I do recommend to stay in your own backyard in the beginning. And the reason why is because there's a ton of benefits to being in your own backyard. And one of those main benefits is you actually can go out to the properties and view the properties. When you're learning this business, there are so many different variables that you're having to learn. You're having to learn how to evaluate deals. You're having to learn how to speak to homeowners. You're having to learn construction costs. And all of these are a little bit easier if you are actually able to go to the properties yourself and look at the properties. You're able to evaluate repair costs. You're able to bring contractors with you and learn repair costs in your market. And then also negotiations with homeowners are a little bit easier whenever you're in person, belly to belly, because that's the highest form of communication that you can have with somebody. And that's where you're going to be able to build rapport. You're going to be able to build trust a lot easier whenever you're in person, belly to belly with a homeowner, and as opposed to just over the phone. You know, over the phone is a much lower form of communication than being in person with somebody. And if you think about credibility and trust, whenever you are in person, that person can physically see you and they're much more likely to build trust with you if you're in person and they know that you're a real person, as opposed to some voice in a box that they have no clue. They don't know you from Adam, and it's a lot harder to build trust whenever you are virtual and you're doing everything over the phone. You have to take greater measures in your processes if you're doing virtual. And that's one of the disadvantages to being virtual. You have to have much stronger processes and systems, and you have to be better at sales if you're operating virtually. And so the answer for most people is that I recommend to start in your own backyard. Now, there are some cases where I do recommend to go outside of your own backyard, even in the beginning. And that's if you're in an ultra competitive market like Los Angeles or San Diego. You know, there's some parts of Southern California where it's just really difficult to get deals. And it may be a better use of your time and your marketing dollars if you're investing in a virtual market. If you're in one of those ultra competitive markets, I'm talking about Los Angeles, San Diego, New York. Those are some main markets. Miami, those are some markets where it's extremely challenging to get deals. And there's other markets, but you know, we're going to dive into the best markets to go into if you're hand selecting a market and you're going virtual, and you'll be able to see the differences in the criteria, where I'm comparing the criteria where here's the ideal criteria for a virtual market that I'm hand selecting versus your criteria if you're in one of those markets like San Diego, Los Angeles, New York. And there's more markets. I'm just naming some of the obvious ones that are really difficult to get deals in. And so If you are in a really, really competitive market and you're having a really, really challenging time getting deals, it may make sense to go into a virtual market. Now, the question is, how do we select a virtual market? Now, when I was first starting my real estate company in the first year of my company, I started off in my own backyard. I started off investing in my own backyard and did really well. I ramped up my business to where I was doing about $30,000 to $40,000 per month just wholesaling in my own backyard. And, I ramped up pretty quickly. I got to a place where, honestly, I was a little bit, I don't want to say arrogant, but I thought that going virtual was going to be easier than it was. And so I got to a place where I had family members and I had people that I knew, friends, family members that lived in other markets that were saying, hey, I want to be a part of what you're doing in real estate. You should start a branch here in this other market. And I was wanting to expand into multiple markets anyway. So I just decided to go into other markets based off of the fact that I had people locally, boots on the ground in those markets. And so I didn't do a ton of market research when I went into these other markets, and it ended up biting me in the rear because I went into these other markets and I just applied the same tactics and the same strategies that I was using in my own market to these other markets with no market research before going into them. And so what ended up happening is I went into 4 different markets in a really short period of time. I think in the span of 2 or 3 months, went into 4 different markets and ended up bringing on a team of 14 people. And it was an absolute disaster. I found myself completely burnt out. We were not having the same success in the virtual markets that we were having in my own backyard. And I realized that not all markets are created equal, that I needed to be way more selective before going into a virtual market than the process that I followed when I had gone into these markets and gotten myself in trouble. So I learned a ton of lessons, and the primary lesson that I learned was not all markets are created equal, because I was operating in markets, I was spending the same amount of money in one market and making a 6 to 8x return on my marketing spend, meaning I would put in $10,000 and get $60,000, $80,000 back in one market, and then I was investing the same amount of money in another market and getting a 2x or a 3x return on investment. And it just was a nightmare trying to run a business like that. And so what I realized, though, in the process, I was able to identify which markets were great markets and which markets were not great markets. And so I put together a criteria, a market evaluation criteria list to where basically when I'm going into a new market, and I'll tell you about some new markets that I went into recently and had a much different experience, but when I'm going into a new market, I have a certain set of criteria points that I evaluate before going into the market. So I have a very thorough evaluation beforehand. So now I know I've done my research, I've done my homework beforehand, and I know almost with certainty that I'm going to be successful going into that market before I actually start marketing. And so now I want to show you what those criteria points are and how we actually identify a virtual market that we're going to go into. And so the first thing that we do whenever we're identifying an ideal market, so the first criteria point that I want to look at when I'm identifying an ideal market, I'm going to look at the MSA population. So the reason why I'm looking at MSA population and the reason why I want to have a target, MSA population target of 500,000 or more as an MSA population size. The reason why I want to have an MSA population size of 500,000 or 500,000 people or more is because I want to make sure if I'm going into a new market that there's enough opportunity to do deals consistently every month. So if I'm going into a market, I want to be able to at least do 1 deal per week, 2 deals per week, every single week in that market. And in order to support that deal volume, there needs to be at least 500,000 people or more in that market to support the consistent deal volume that I'm looking for when going into a new market. And so the second criteria point that I'm looking for is the median home price. So median home price, what I'm looking at with the median home price is I'm looking at a range of 250,000 to 350,000. So this is the range. This is the median home price range that I'm looking for with an ideal market that I'm going to go into. Now, this is if I'm hand selecting a market. If I'm going into a virtual market, I'm hand selecting where I'm going to invest or where I'm going to wholesale. This is the price range that I'm looking for the median home price. Now, the reason why I'm looking for a median home price range of 250K to 350K is because if I'm below $250,000 as a median home price, then my profit margins usually end up being really, really thin. And this is one of the things that I learned when I was investing in 4 different markets early on, is that some of the markets that I was in, it was easy to get deals in, but my profit margins were really slim. And it was really hard to scale a business whenever I'm averaging $8,000, $10,000 on my wholesale deals. It was really hard to scale my business. While I had other markets that I was investing in that were in this range, 250K to 350K, and the median home price was in that range, and now our average profit per deal were $20,000, $25,000 on our wholesale deals, and it's much easier to scale a business whenever your profit per deal is significantly higher. So that's why we don't want to go below 250K. The reason why we don't want to go above 350,000 is because whenever you get into these higher price points, number one, you're dealing with a more sophisticated seller, and it's harder to negotiate with a sophisticated seller, but also there are fewer transactions in these higher price point ranges. So your deal profits are going to be much higher, but it's much harder to get deals in these higher price point markets. And so that's why I select a range of $250,000 to $350,000 for the median home price. Now, third criteria point that we're looking at is the average days on market. So I want to look at the average days on market. The target that I'm looking for is less than 45 days as the average days on market. So we're looking for less than 45 days. So 45 days or less as the average days on market. Why? Because I want it to be a transaction market. And if you're wholesaling, you want to make sure that the buyers that are purchasing your houses are actually selling those properties in a timely fashion, because that's going to create more demand for your wholesale deals. If your buyers who are flipping houses are able to sell their properties efficiently, that means they're going to want to buy more properties from you. It means you're going to be able to sell more deals to your buyers, and there's going to be more demand for your properties. Now, also, if you're doing other exit strategies, if you're flipping the properties yourself, or you're doing novation deals and you're listing properties on the market, you want to make sure that the properties aren't just going to sit on market whenever you list it retail. If you're doing a novation, you're going to be listing those properties retail. Or if you are flipping the house or doing a wholesale deal and putting the deals on market, then all of those exit strategies require you to list properties retail, which means you need to pay attention to this number, and you need to make sure that your deals are not going to be sitting for a long time on market, and that there's demand for the properties that you're going to put on market. Now, another thing that we're going to look at is we're going to look at the number of transactions that are sold per month. So the number of sales, home sales that are happening per month. So number of home sales per month. And the reason why is I want to make sure that there's a lot of homes being sold on a monthly basis. Now, what I end up doing is I end up building a spreadsheet when I'm evaluating markets. And I just recently did this, and there's a reason why it's so important to do your homework if you're going to go into a virtual market. So what I do is I build a spreadsheet, and I put all of these columns on the spreadsheet, and I want to look at all of the data for the markets that I'm considering. And the last criteria point that I want to look at is the number of absentee purchases per month. So I'm going to go into list source. I'm going to pull the number of absentee purchases per month. So I want to see the relationship. I want to see the correlation to number of home sales, but also I want to see the relationship of total number of home sales to absentee home sales each month. So absentee, sorry, it's a little bit hard to see this last line down here, but the number of absentee purchases per month. You can find this in ListSource. If you go into ListSource, I may do another training on number of absentee purchases, but these are the 5 main criteria points that I'm going to look at when I'm evaluating virtual markets. And what I want to do is I want to put all of these criteria points as columns onto a spreadsheet, and now I'm going to be able to see a bird's eye view of all of these markets and be able to compare these markets before I go into a market. Now, I just recently did this exercise because I recently went into a couple of virtual markets, and when I was going into the virtual markets, I built the spreadsheet just with this criteria, and I put it all on the spreadsheet, and I was able to look and I was able to see which markets, based on all of these data points, looked best to invest in based off of all of the criteria points taken into consideration together, which ones fit the best mold all together. And so what I was able to do is I was able to select 2 markets that I thought looked really good on paper. And what I ended up doing is doing a light test, a light marketing test going into those markets. Anytime I'm going into a new market, I want to do a light test. I want to dip my toe in the water and do a light marketing test where I'm typically going in with SMS. Sometimes I'll do some light PPC or cold calling as well going into the market, but I'm testing it with a light budget, a very small budget, because I want to see how the market feedback is whenever I dip my toe in the waters. And so doing this light test within my first 2 weeks in these markets, I was able to get two really good deals in my first 2 weeks. And now since then, I've been in there for a little over a month, and we've gotten several deals within a month. I think we've gotten 4 or 5 deals in these new markets within the first 6 to 8 weeks of operating in those new markets. So that's how you know you've selected a really good virtual market, is when you dip your toes in the water, you get a really healthy response from your marketing, and you're going to have to spend less money on marketing to get deals in a market where you evaluate the criteria the proper way. You're going to end up spending less money to get deals, and I just love this game because it makes the game really, really fun, because now the entire country is your opportunity zone. Now you have the ability to go into any market in the United States and hand select where you're going to operate, and you can make your business as profitable or scalable as you want. And that's where the game becomes really, really fun. Now, just to reiterate, for most people, I recommend to at least start in your own backyard as you're building your business, as you get traction and you're wanting to expand your business, or if you're in an ultra competitive market, it will make sense for most people to go into a virtual market at some point in time, whether you're looking to scale or you're looking to get out of an ultra competitive market. It'll make sense to go into a virtual market. And if you are, utilize this criteria to select your market, do your homework, do your due diligence before you go into the market, and then do a light test before you go all in on a market. So guys, take this feedback, implement it in your business if you're going into a virtual market. And if you like this information, make sure to hit the like button, hit the subscribe button so that we can reach more of you guys, and so that you can get notified whenever I'm putting out more videos, because I'm putting out 2 to 3 videos per week right now. So if you want to see more videos like this, click the subscribe button. And if you are looking for help scaling your business, I will attach a link in the section below. So if you want more help scaling your business, you can go to the link below or go to reigamechangers.com and we can help you scale up your real estate business. So again, guys, if you like the content, click the subscribe button, click the like button so that you get notified when we put out more videos, and look forward to seeing you guys soon. Thank you so much.